In a quiet part of Iowa, there was a man most people would have walked past without looking twice. His name was Dale Schroeder. He was not famous. He was not powerful. He did not own a company with his name on the building. He did not wear expensive suits, drive expensive cars, or live in a house that made strangers stop and stare. For most of his life, he was simply a carpenter, a blue-collar man, a lunch pail man. The kind of man who went to work, did the job, came home, and never asked the world to clap for him. He had no wife. He had no children. And when he died, many people assumed his story would end quietly, just as he had lived. But they were wrong. Because after Dale Schroeder was gone, a secret came out. Not a scandal. Not a hidden crime. Not a family betrayal. Something much rarer. A secret act of kindness so large that it changed the lives of 33 young people he would never meet. Before this story is over, students who thought college was impossible would walk across graduation stages. Some would become teachers. Some would become therapists. Some would become doctors. Some would build families of their own, and every one of them would carry the name of a quiet carpenter from Iowa who had no children, but somehow left behind a family. If you enjoy true stories about ordinary people, quiet sacrifice, second chances, and the hidden side of the American dream, follow this channel. These are the kinds of stories that deserve to be remembered. This is not just a story about money. It is a story about what a person does when no one is watching. It is a story about a man who never had much, but understood exactly what it felt like to need a chance. And it begins, not in a college classroom, not at a graduation ceremony, and not in front of cameras. It begins with an old carpenter walking into a lawyer's office with one question. He had saved money his entire life. He had lived simply. He had spent little. He had asked for almost nothing. And now, near the end, he wanted to know if his savings could do what life had never done for him. Could his money send poor kids to college? To understand why that question mattered, you have to understand the kind of man Dale Schroeder was. Dale grew up poor in Iowa. He knew what it meant to look at opportunity from the outside. He knew what it meant to want something and still understand that wanting it was not enough. College was not part of his life. Not because he lacked the ability to learn, not because he lacked discipline, but because life, money, and circumstance had already drawn a line in front of him. Some people are told from childhood that the world is open to them. Other people learn early that every door has a price. Dale belonged to the second group. He went to work. He became a carpenter, and for 67 years, he worked at the same Des Moines business. Think about that for a moment. 67 years. Longer than many marriages, longer than many companies survive, longer than some people live. Year after year, decade after decade, Dale showed up. He carried tools. He worked with his hands. He built things that other people would use. He measured, cut, lifted, hammered, and repaired. He did not make speeches about hard work. He simply worked. To the outside world, there was nothing dramatic about him. He owned an old truck. He dressed plainly. He lived carefully. People who knew him remembered a man with simple habits, work clothes, church clothes, and no interest in showing off. Some people spend their lives trying to look rich. Dale spent his life trying not to waste what he had. And because he was so quiet, almost no one understood what was happening beneath the surface. They saw a carpenter. They did not see a fortune being built one careful decision at a time. They saw a man who did not spend much. They did not see a plan forming in the last chapters of his life. They saw someone ordinary. They did not see someone preparing to change the future of strangers. That is what makes this story so powerful. Dale did not look like the kind of man who would change lives. And maybe that is the point. The people who change lives are not always the ones standing on stages. Sometimes they are the ones sitting quietly in the back of the room. Sometimes they are the ones driving rusty trucks. Sometimes they are the ones carrying a lunch pail to work every morning. Sometimes they are the ones no one expects anything from. Dale never married. He had no children of his own. There was no son waiting to inherit his savings. There was no daughter expecting the old truck, the accounts, or the last pieces of his life. There were no grandchildren whose names had already been written into the future. For many people, that would have made the question easy. Keep the money. Spend it. Leave it to distant relatives. Let the estate settle itself. But Dale was thinking about something else. He was thinking about kids like the boy he once was. Small-town kids, poor kids, capable kids, young people who had the grades, the work ethic, and the dream, but not the money. He knew that feeling. He knew how heavy a dream can become when a family cannot pay for it. He knew that some dreams do not die because people are lazy. They die because tuition is too high. They die because parents are already stretched too thin. They die because a teenager looks at the numbers and decides it would be kinder not to ask. That is a quiet kind of heartbreak. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just a young person placing a dream back on the shelf because the price tag is too heavy. Dale understood that kind of heartbreak. And near the end of his life, he decided he wanted to do something about it. So he went to his lawyer. The meeting could have been ordinary, an old man settling his affairs, a few papers, a few signatures, a discussion about where the money should go. But then Dale explained what he wanted. He had never had the opportunity to go to college. He wanted to help kids go to college. The idea was simple. The amount was not, because after years of carpentry work, frugal living, and careful saving, Dale had quietly built a fortune of nearly $3 million. Nearly $3 million. From a man many people thought was simply an old carpenter with a rusty truck. That is the first great turn in this story, but the money is not the real miracle. The real miracle is what he wanted the money to do. He did not ask for a building with his name on it. He did not ask for a statue. He did not ask for applause. He did not ask to be remembered by strangers on the internet. He asked that small-town Iowa kids be given the chance he never had. That was it. That was the heart of the gift. A man who never went to college decided that other people should. A man with no children decided to invest in other people's children. A man who lived quietly decided that his money should speak after he was gone. Before we go further, I want to ask you something. If you had spent your whole life saving money, would you have kept it for yourself, left it to relatives, or given it to young strangers you would never meet? Tell me honestly in the comments. I really want to know what you would have done. When Dale died in 2005, the world did not stop. There were no national headlines at first. No crowds gathered in the streets. No one outside his circle knew that something extraordinary had just been set in motion, but Dale had left instructions. And instructions, when written by a man like him, mattered. His money was to help small-town Iowa students go to college. Not students who already had everything lined up. Not students whose families could easily write checks. Not students who saw college as a guaranteed next step. Students who were standing on the edge of their future and wondering whether they would have to turn back. The scholarship effort began after his death. People who had known Dale, trusted Dale, and understood the spirit of his gift helped carry it out. It was not as simple as handing money to strangers. There had to be a process. There had to be responsibility. There had to be careful stewardship. The people handling Dale's gift had to find the right students. They were not only looking for good grades, they were looking for something deeper. A certain kind of character, a willingness to work, a sense of responsibility, a heart that understood what it meant to receive a gift and then carry it forward. Some called it the Dale factor. It was not something you could measure with one number. It was something you had to sense in a person. Would this student take the opportunity seriously? Would this student understand the sacrifice behind it? Would this student become the kind of person Dale would have wanted to help? That is not an easy thing to judge, but one by one, the students came, young people from Iowa, young people with dreams, young people who were not asking for luxury. They were asking for a door to open. One of them was a young woman named Kira Conard. Kira had the grades. She had the dream. She wanted to help people as a mental health therapist, but wanting a future and paying for a future are two different things. She came from a single-parent household. There were other children in the family. College was not just expensive. It felt impossible. Imagine being young enough to dream, but old enough to know the numbers do not work. Imagine standing at the edge of adulthood and feeling that your future may be decided not by your character, not by your effort, not by your grades, but by your family's bank account. That was the place where many of Dale's students stood. They were not looking for an easy road. They were looking for a road at all. And then the call came. Bakira. The call changed everything. She learned that a man she had never met, a carpenter from Des Moines who had already passed away, had left behind money for students like her. Not a loan, not a trap, not a debt she would carry into adulthood like a weight around her neck. A gift, a way forward. Try to imagine that moment. 1 minute. A young person is preparing to let go of a dream. The next minute, a stranger reaches across time and says, not with his voice but with his life savings, keep going. That is what Dale Schroeder did. He said keep going. Not to one student, not to 2, but to 33. The scholarships began in 2007. The last class entered college in 2015. Across those years, 33 Iowa students received a college education because one carpenter had decided his money should outlive him in a very specific way. Some received full rides. Some received other scholarship support, but every one of them received something larger than money. They received permission to imagine a different life. That is something people with resources sometimes do not understand. Money does not only pay bills. In the right moment, money can change what a person believes is possible. It can turn a dream from foolish into reachable. It can turn a closed door into a hallway. It can take a young person who has been quietly shrinking their future and tell them to stand up again. Dale's gift did that. It reached into homes, kitchens, graduation parties, and family conversations. It reached young people who were trying to be brave while preparing for disappointment. It reached parents who wanted more for their children than they could afford to provide. It reached futures that might have gone in completely different directions, and Dale never saw any of it. That is the second great turn in this story. Dale did not live to shake their hands. He did not sit in the crowd at their graduations. He did not receive thank you cards from every life that changed. He did not watch Kira build the career she once thought was slipping away. He did not meet the doctors, teachers, therapists, and professionals who came out of his gift. He gave without witnessing the harvest. That kind of giving is different. Many people want to be generous as long as they can see the gratitude. They want the thank you. They want the hug. They want the photograph. They want to know exactly how loved they are for what they did. There is nothing wrong with being thanked, but Dale's gift did not depend on applause. He was already gone. His generosity had to stand on its own. And that may be why it feels so pure. He gave because he remembered. He remembered being poor. He remembered not going to college. He remembered what opportunity had felt like when it was just out of reach, and he decided that his money would become the handrail for someone else. The students who received his gift eventually gave themselves a name. They called themselves Dale's kids. Think about that. A man with no descendants became part of a family he never met. Not by blood, not by marriage, not by a last name, by sacrifice, by memory, by gratitude. Dale's kids grew up. They graduated. They entered the world. They carried the gift into classrooms, clinics, offices, homes, and communities. Some helped patients. Some helped students. Some helped families. Some helped people through the hardest moments of their lives. And behind all of that work was an old carpenter who had once looked at his own missed opportunity and refused to let that be the end of the story. This is the part that makes Dale Schroeder's story different from a simple story about a hidden fortune. If all Dale had done was save money, the story would be interesting. A poor man becomes quietly wealthy. A modest carpenter leaves behind millions. That is surprising. But it is not enough. What makes the story unforgettable is the direction of the money. He did not use his fortune to prove he was rich. He used it to prove that someone else mattered. He turned money into movement. Movement, From small towns to college campuses. Movement from fear to confidence. Movement from one generation's missed chance to another generation's open door. That is a rare kind of legacy, because many legacies are built on monuments. Dale's legacy was built on people, not stone, not steel, not a name carved over an entrance. People. Living people. People who could laugh, work, study, struggle, graduate, fail, get back up, love, serve, and pass kindness forward. There is a reason this story touches so many people. It forces us to ask what a life is really worth. Not what a person earns, not what a person owns, not what people assume when they see his clothes or his truck, but what remains after he is gone. For Dale, what remained was not just money. What remained was a set of futures. There is a kind of loneliness in his story too. We should not ignore that. A man without children, a man who never married, a man who worked for decades and lived simply. It would be easy to turn him into a perfect symbol and forget that he was a real person. Real people are more complicated than symbols. Maybe Dale had regrets. Maybe he had quiet disappointments. Maybe there were nights when the house felt too silent. Maybe there were moments when he wondered what his life would leave behind. We cannot pretend to know every private corner of his heart, but we can see what he chose. And choices reveal a person. Dale chose not to let his life end with a bank account. He chose not to let his money become a pile of numbers in a legal file. He chose not to let his own missed chance turn into bitterness. Instead, he turned it into opportunity. That is not small. That is one of the most beautiful things a person can do. He took the ache of his own life and used it to soften the road for someone else. If this story is touching you, give this video a like so more people can hear about Dale and people like him. Stories like this often disappear unless someone helps carry them forward. The more you think about it, the more powerful the details become. The work genes, the church genes, the old truck, the carpentry tools, the long years at the same job, the plain life, the quiet saving, the lawyer's office, the nearly $3 million. The students who never met him, the phone calls that changed everything, the reunions where Dale's kids gathered around memories of a man whose face many of them knew only from photographs. There is something deeply American about this story. Not the loud version of America, not the version with speeches, slogans, and giant promises. The quieter version. The America of work boots and lunch pails. The America of small towns and long shifts. The America of people who do not talk much about generosity because they are too busy practicing it. Dale Schroeder belonged to that America, and the students he helped belonged to another part of it. The part that still believes education can open a life. The part that still believes a stranger's kindness can change a family line. The part that still believes a poor kid from a small town should not have to bury a dream simply because the bill is too high. That belief mattered to Dale because he had lived on the other side of it. He had known the locked door, so he left behind keys. Not one key, 33 keys, one for each student. Each key opened a different future. For one student, it opened a career in mental health. For another, a classroom. For another, a medical path. For another, a chance to become the first person in the family to walk across a college stage. When people talk about paying for college, they often speak in numbers: tuition, fees, books, housing, debt, interest. But behind every number is a young person making a decision. Can I go? Should I give up? Can I ask my family for more? Will I spend years paying for this? Am I worth the risk? Dale's gift answered that last question in a way many students never forgot. Yes, you are worth the risk. A man who never met you believed that. A man who worked 67 years believed that. A man who could have done anything else with his money believed that. So go. Study. Become who you were trying to become. And when you can, help someone else. That last part mattered. The students were not asked to pay Dale back. How could they? Dale was gone. The debt was not a financial debt. It was a moral invitation. Pay it forward. carry the kindness into another life, become the answer to someone else's prayer. That idea is simple, but it is not easy. Because paying it forward means refusing to let kindness stop with you. It means understanding that a gift is not only something you receive, it is something you are trusted with. Dale's kids understood that. Some of them built careers around helping others. Some carried the story into their work. Some carried it into their families. Some carried it into the way they looked at strangers. And Kira, who once thought her dream might be impossible, later found herself helping people through their darkest days. Think about that chain. Dale could not go to college. So he sent Kira. Kira became someone who could help others heal. Those people, in turn, carried that healing into their families and communities. One gift became many gifts. One life touched dozens. Dozens touched hundreds. And the carpenter who never had children became part of a story much larger than himself. That is how quiet legacies work. They do not always announce themselves. They move from hand to hand, from one life to another, from one chance to the next. Sometimes, years later, someone looks around and realizes that a person who seemed ordinary had quietly changed everything. There is also a lesson here about how badly we misjudge people. We judge by clothes. We judge by cars. We judge by houses. We judge by titles. We judge by the way someone speaks, the way someone spends, and the way someone appears in public. Dale would not have looked like a millionaire to many people, and yet he had saved nearly $3 million. More importantly, he had saved it for a reason. That is the part we often miss. A person's outer life does not always tell the truth about their inner purpose. Some people who look successful are empty. Some people who look ordinary are carrying a kingdom of kindness inside them. Dale was one of those people. He carried something quietly. And when he was gone, that quiet thing became loud enough for 33 lives to hear. The most emotional moment in this story may not be the lawyer's office. It may not be the phone call. It may not even be the graduations. It may be the gatherings afterward. The students came together. They honored him. They sat with one another and shared the strange bond of being loved by the same stranger. They looked at Dale's old lunchbox. They heard stories about who he had been. They understood that they were connected not only by a scholarship, but by a responsibility. Dale had chosen them. Not because they were perfect. Not because their lives would be easy, but because they had the chance to become something if someone would just help them begin. Every generation needs people like that. People who help others begin. Parents do it. Teachers do it. Grandparents do it. Coaches do it. Neighbors do it. And sometimes, a carpenter with no children does it for students he will never meet. That is why this story stays with people, because most of us know what it means to need someone. Most of us have had a moment when one phone call, one check, one word of encouragement, one open door, or one act of faith could change everything. And most of us can remember someone who helped us when they did not have to. Maybe it was a parent. Maybe it was a teacher. Maybe it was an employer. Maybe it was a neighbor. Maybe it was a stranger. Maybe it was someone who never knew how much their kindness meant. If someone like that came to your mind, write their name in the comments. Some people deserve to be remembered, even if the whole world never knew what they did. Dale Schroeder's life also reminds us that it is never too late for a life to become generous. Some people think legacy is something built only by the famous people, by presidents, by business owners, by celebrities, by people with platforms and cameras and public attention. But Dale's story says something else. Legacy can be built by showing up to work, by living within your means, by remembering where you came from, by refusing to let your own disappointment turn into hardness, by asking before the end, what can my life still give? That question matters. What can my life still give? Dale answered it with college tuition. Someone else might answer it with time. Someone else with forgiveness. Someone else with mentorship. Someone else with a meal, a ride, a phone call, or a room for someone who has nowhere to go. Not everyone can leave behind millions. Most people cannot. But everyone can decide whether their story ends with them. Dale decided his would not. He had no children, but he became part of 33 futures. He never went to college, but he sent others there. He lived quietly, but his kindness made noise after he was gone. He worked with wood, but in the end, what he built was people. That is the beauty of this story. A carpenter spent his life building things that may one day be replaced, repaired, remodeled, or forgotten. But the futures he built with his final gift are still moving. They are alive in every patient helped by a doctor who was once one of Dale's kids. They are alive in every student taught by a teacher who once received Dale's gift. They are alive in every person comforted by a therapist who once thought college was impossible. They are alive in every act of kindness those students choose because someone once chose kindness for them. You cannot measure that with a simple dollar amount. Nearly $3 million is a large sum. But the true value of Dale's gift is larger than money. It is measured in lives redirected, in families changed, in dreams rescued, in the quiet courage of students who finally had a way forward. When Dale walked into that lawyer's office, he did not just make a financial decision. He made a human decision. He decided that his own missed chance would become someone else's open door. That is why his story deserves to be told, because in a world that often celebrates the loudest people, Dale reminds us to look for the quiet ones. The ones who do not announce every good deed, the ones who do not make generosity into a performance, the ones who carry kindness like a private duty, the ones who leave the world better without demanding that the world notice them first. Dale Schroeder was one of those people. And because of him, 33 students got to walk into a future they once feared they might never reach. Near the end of a story like this, it is tempting to say that Dale had no family, but that is not really true. He may have had no descendants. He may have had no children waiting at home. He may have had no grandchildren sitting on his knee, but family is not only blood. Sometimes family is the people who carry your love forward. Sometimes family is the people who speak your name with gratitude. Sometimes family is the group that gathers years later around an old lunchbox and understands that their lives were connected by one man's choice. Dale had that. He had Dale's kids, and Dale's kids had him. Not in the way most families have someone. They could not call him. They could not visit him. They could not thank him face to face. But they could live in a way that honored him. They could take the chance he gave them and make it matter. They could pay it forward. They could become proof that Dale's quiet life was not small at all. And maybe that is the final lesson. A life does not have to be loud to be large. A person does not have to be famous to be unforgettable. A man does not have to have children to leave a family behind. And sometimes, the richest person in town is not the one with the biggest house. It is the one whose kindness keeps growing after he is gone. Dale Schroeder was a carpenter. He owned work jeans and church jeans. He drove an old truck. He lived simply. He went to work for 67 years. He saved carefully. He asked for little. And when his time came, he gave the one thing he could give to the kids who reminded him of himself: a chance. For 33 students, that chance became college. For their families, it became relief. For their communities, it became service. For the rest of us, it became a reminder. Do not underestimate quiet people. Do not assume an ordinary life is an empty one. Do not wait until you are rich, famous, or powerful to ask what good you can do. And never forget that the opportunity you missed can still become the opportunity you give someone else. If this story moved you, leave a comment and tell me what you think Dale's greatest gift really was. Was it the money, the education, or the example he left behind? And if you want more true American stories about ordinary people, hidden kindness, second chances, family, sacrifice, and the quiet heroes most people never hear about, subscribe to this channel. There are many more lives like Dale's waiting to be remembered. Because Dale Schroeder never had children of his own, but 33 people carried his kindness into the world. Not as a last name, not as an inheritance, but as a promise to keep going, a promise to remember, a promise to pass it forward. And somewhere in Iowa, long after the old Carpenter was gone, that promise kept building, one life at a time.